My father always had a favorite child, and it was never me. Growing up, my older brother Daniel could do no wrong in my dad's eyes. If Daniel brought home a C on a test, my father would say the teacher was unfair. If he skipped chores, Dad would laugh and say, boys will be boys. But when I brought home straight A's, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. Good, he'd say flatly. That's what you're supposed to do. It wasn't always like that with everyone in the family, though. My grandfather, Thomas, saw things differently. Grandpa believed that effort mattered more than attention. While my brother chased quick success and easy praise, Grandpa quietly noticed who actually showed up. When I was 16, I started helping him at his small logistics company after school. It wasn't glamorous work. Most of the time I was stacking paperwork, organizing deliveries, or cleaning the warehouse. Daniel never came with me. He said the place smelled like diesel and hard work. But I liked it. Grandpa would sit in his office with a cup of black coffee, watching the trucks come and go while explaining how the business worked. He taught me how contracts worked, how drivers planned their routes, and why reputation mattered more than fast money. Businesses don't survive on luck, he once told me. They survive on trust. Those afternoons became routine for years. Even when I went to college, I still came back on weekends to help him. Daniel never did. My father never noticed that difference either. To him, Daniel was the successful one, the charismatic one, the one who would do big things someday. Then, last winter, everything changed. Grandpa passed away quietly in his sleep. The funeral was large. Grandpa had known a lot of people in business, and many of them came to pay their respects. But even that day, I noticed something strange. My father and Daniel kept whispering to each other during the reception. Every time someone mentioned Grandpa's company or his estate, Daniel would smile like he already knew something the rest of us didn't. A week later, the lawyer called. The will reading would take place the following Monday. When we arrived at the law office, the room felt tense. My father sat confidently beside Daniel, his arm resting on the back of his chair like he already knew the outcome. Daniel looked almost excited. I sat quietly across the table. The lawyer eventually walked in carrying a thick folder. He adjusted his glasses and looked around the room. Thank you all for coming, he said. We are here to review the final will and testament of Thomas Whitaker. My father leaned forward slightly. Daniel cracked his knuckles with anticipation. The lawyer opened the folder and began reading. At first everything sounded normal, but then he reached the part about the inheritance. To my grandson Daniel, my brother sat up straighter. I leave my home, my investment accounts, and the majority of my estate. My father's face broke into a satisfied smile. Daniel leaned back in his chair like he had just won something. Then the lawyer continued. To my grandson Michael, the room went silent. I leave my personal watch and my collection of books. That was it. No money, no property, just a watch and a few books. Daniel chuckled quietly. Guess Grandpa knew who deserved it. My father didn't correct him. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. They were waiting for me to be angry, disappointed, maybe even embarrassed. But instead, I slowly leaned back in my chair, and I smiled. Then I looked directly at the lawyer and said calmly, Excuse me, could you please read the last page? The lawyer paused and looked down at the document again. Last page, he asked. I nodded calmly. Yes, the very last page. Daniel laughed under his breath. Oh, come on, Michael, he said. The will's already been read. Don't make this awkward. My father sighed impatiently. Your grandfather was very clear, he added. Daniel gets the estate. But the lawyer flipped through the papers anyway. Page after page turned quietly in the room. Then suddenly he stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly as he reread a section near the back. The confident expression on Daniel's face began to fade. What is it? My father asked. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. It appears your grandfather added a conditional clause to the will. My father frowned. A clause. The lawyer nodded slowly and began reading. In the event that the majority of my estate is transferred to my grandson Daniel, the ownership of Thomas Logistics will follow a separate condition. Daniel leaned forward. That's the company, he said confidently. So what? The lawyer continued. The company will remain under Daniel's ownership only if he has actively worked for the business for a minimum of 5 years prior to my passing. The room went completely silent. Daniel's face stiffened, because everyone in that room knew the truth. He had never worked there. Not once. The lawyer continued reading. If this condition has not been fulfilled. My father leaned forward quickly. Well, the lawyer turned the page and finished the sentence. The company will instead transfer entirely to my grandson Michael. Daniel stared at him. You're joking. But the lawyer simply slid the document across the table. The signature at the bottom was clearly my grandfather's. My father's confident posture disappeared. But Daniel gets everything else, he argued. The lawyer nodded calmly. Yes. Then he looked directly at me. But the company is now legally his. And that's when Daniel finally understood something. The logistics company alone was worth more than the rest of the estate combined. Daniel stared at the lawyer like he had just heard the most ridiculous thing in the world. You're serious? He said. The lawyer didn't react. He simply tapped the document again. It's written clearly in the will. Your grandfather added this clause himself. My father leaned forward, his voice suddenly tense. But Daniel inherits the estate. The house, the accounts, everything. That's what Dad wanted. The lawyer nodded calmly. Yes, Daniel receives the majority of the personal estate. He paused for a moment before continuing. But Thomas Logistics was treated separately. Daniel slammed his hand lightly on the table. This is insane. I'm his grandson too. I stayed quiet, watching the room carefully. The lawyer folded his hands. Your grandfather also included an explanation. That made everyone look up. He flipped to another page and began reading aloud. My grandson Daniel has always preferred comfort over responsibility. That is his choice, and I do not judge him for it. However, the company I built was created through years of work, sacrifice, and trust. Daniel's face tightened. The lawyer continued. The person who understands that work is the one who stood beside me in the warehouse, not the one who only saw the finished success. My father slowly turned to look at me, because he suddenly remembered something. For years, every weekend, I had been at the company with Grandpa, learning the business, helping with deliveries, understanding the people who worked there. Daniel shifted in his chair uncomfortably. This is ridiculous, he muttered. A few afternoons at a warehouse doesn't mean anything. The lawyer calmly slid another folder across the table. It wasn't a few afternoons. Inside were employment records, signed training documents, and partnership notes. My grandfather had officially listed me as operations manager 2 years earlier. My father's eyes widened. You were working there officially? I nodded. Grandpa asked me to help run things when his health started getting worse. Daniel looked furious now. So you planned this? I shook my head slowly. No, Grandpa did. The room fell silent again. Daniel had the house, the cars, the money, but the company, the thing Grandpa had spent his entire life building, was now legally mine. And everyone in that room finally understood something my grandfather had known all along. Some people inherit money, but the people who show up, work hard, and protect the legacy, they inherit